The Cathar Military Academy was a place of cold metal and strict rules. The hallways were a dull gray, and the lights from the ceiling were bright and harsh. There were no decorations, no colors. Everything was built for one reason: to create the best soldiers in the galaxy. In a huge circular room, hundreds of cadets sat in perfect lines. They were the Cathar, a race of reptilian people. They had sleek scales that were a mix of dark green and black. Their eyes were yellow with a thin black slit in the middle like a cat's. They did not move or whisper. They sat perfectly still, waiting. On a raised platform at the front of the room, Instructor Tay paced slowly. He was older than the cadets. The scales on his face were crisscrossed with pale scars. One of his fingers was missing its sharp claw. He was a veteran of many battles, and his presence made the air feel heavy. He stopped pacing and looked out at the young faces. Today's lecture, his voice was a low rasp that echoed in the quiet room, is a tactical analysis. The title of the lesson is How to Slay a Human. A low hum filled the air as a large, bright hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed the body of a human being. The skin was see-through, showing the bones and organs inside. Red lines pointed to different parts: the brain, the heart, the spine. Tay began his lesson. Humans are a young species. They are weak. They come from a world they call Earth. Its gravity is standard. Its atmosphere is normal. But the humans themselves are flawed. He used a laser pointer to circle the human's head. Their skull is thick, but it can be cracked with a strong impact. Their brain is soft and easily damaged. He moved the pointer to the chest. Here is the heart. It is a simple pump. Pierce it, and the human will bleed out internally in less than a minute. They have 2 lungs. Puncture one and the human will drown in its own blood. The other lung will not be enough. The cadets watched, their eyes following the pointer. They believed every word. Why would they not? Their instructor was wise and experienced. Look at their limbs, Tay continued. The joints are weak points. The knee, the elbow, the shoulder. A sharp twist or a strong blow will break them. Humans cannot walk on a broken leg. They cannot fight with a broken arm. He listed more weaknesses. They have no natural armor. Their skin is soft and tears easily. They have no claws. Their teeth are flat, made for chewing soft plants and meat, not for fighting. They cannot see well in the dark. Their sense of smell is poor. Their hearing is average. In every physical way, they are inferior to a Cathar warrior. In a small booth high up on the wall behind a sheet of clear glass, 2 people watched the lesson. They were the subjects of the lecture. They were humans. The man's name was Jin. He was the official xenocultural liaison. He sat very still in his chair, his hands resting on his knees. He wore a simple dark uniform. His face showed no emotion as he listened to Instructor Tay list the many ways to kill him. The woman next to him was Mira. She was his backup. Her job was to watch and to listen. Her eyes were not on the hologram, but on a small screen in her hand. She was checking the translator to make sure it was working perfectly. She also showed no emotion, but her focus was sharp and constant. They had been invited to the academy. The Cathar government said it was a sign of friendship and trust. But Jin and Mira knew the truth. They were here to be studied. They were living examples, like a strange insect pinned to a board. The Cathar wanted to show their future soldiers that humans were nothing to be afraid of. Down below, Instructor Tay was finishing his list of human flaws. The greatest weakness of a human is their need for oxygen. They must breathe it in constantly. Their bodies cannot store it for long. Cut off their air and they will become weak, then dizzy, then unconscious. They will die in a few short minutes. This is why poison gases are so effective against them. He turned off the hologram. The room became a little darker. Remember this, he said, his voice growing louder. To slay a human is not a great challenge. It is a simple task of engineering. You find the weakest point in the machine and you apply force. They are slow. They are weak. They are predictable. They are made of broken parts waiting to fail. In the booth, Jin finally moved. He leaned forward just a little, his eyes fixed on Instructor Tay. A very small, almost invisible smile touched the corners of his mouth. It was not a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile a person has when they know a secret that everyone else has missed. Mira saw the smile from the corner of her eye. She did not smile back. She simply gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. She was ready. They had known a display like this would happen. They had planned for it. Down on the main floor, Instructor Tay called forward one of his best cadets. Hana, step forward. A female Cathar moved out of the lines and walked to the platform. She moved with a smooth, confident grace. Her scales shone under the lights. Cadet Hana will now demonstrate the primary strike patterns, Tay announced. A new hologram appeared. This one was a human-shaped dummy, glowing with soft blue light. It was programmed to show damage. The first kill point is the throat, Tay said. Hana moved faster than a human eye could easily follow. Her hand, with its sharp, hardened fingers, snapped forward in a precise jab. It hit the dummy's throat. The hologram flashed red around the neck. A symbol appeared, showing a crushed larynx. The word neutralized flashed in the Cathar language. A strike here collapses the airway. The human cannot breathe. It will panic and fall, Tay explained. The cadets watched, impressed by Hana's speed and accuracy. The second kill point is the knee. Hana spun and kicked out, her foot connecting with the side of the dummy's knee. A loud crack sound echoed in the room. The hologram leg bent at a wrong angle, flashing red. The word disabled appeared. A broken leg removes the human's mobility. It becomes a stationary target, Tay said. He had Hana demonstrate more strikes. A blow to the temple to cause brain damage. A strike to the lower back to damage the spine. Each time the hologram flashed red and announced a successful injury. Jin watched all of this from the booth. His small smile never left his face. He looked like a parent watching a child show them a drawing they were very proud of. He was not angry. He was not offended. He was interested. The demonstration ended. Hana returned to her seat, her head held high. The other cadets looked at her with respect. Instructor Tay faced his students again. You see, it is a simple process. Find the weakness. Apply the force. The human dies. There is no mystery. They are fragile creatures. In the quiet that followed, a sound came from the observation booth. It was the soft click of a microphone being turned on. Every Cathar head in the room turned to look up at the glass booth. The two humans had been so quiet, many of the cadets had almost forgotten they were there. Jin leaned forward slightly, towards the small microphone on the desk. His voice was calm and clear. It was not loud, but it carried across the entire silent room. Instructor Tay, Jin said. A question, if I may. Tay's head tilted. His tongue, thin and forked, flicked out for a second in surprise and irritation. He had not expected the specimen to speak. The human has a query? Tay asked, his voice dripping with cold politeness. Jin's small smile finally became a full, visible grin. It was a wide, white grin that showed his flat, chewing teeth. The simulation is very impressive, Jin said, his tone friendly, but it operates on a flawed blueprint. A wave of soft whispers went through the cadets. No one criticized Instructor Tay. No one. Tay's scales tightened against his body. Explain, he commanded, his voice a low growl. Your simulation, Jin said. It assumes the human is a machine. You believe that if you break one important part, the whole machine just stops working. He paused, letting the Cathar think about his words. But a human is not a machine. Jin continued, his grin not fading. A human is a story, and a story does not end just because you tear out a single page. The silence in the amphitheater was now absolute and heavy. The air itself seemed to freeze. Every single Cathar cadet was staring at the human in the observation booth. Their yellow, slitted eyes were wide with a mix of shock and insult. No one spoke to Instructor Tay that way. Tay himself stood perfectly still on the central dais. The scars on his face seemed to stand out more against his tightened scales. His forked tongue flicked out once, twice, tasting the strange tension in the air. He was not used to being corrected, especially not by a soft-skinned, weak-lunged creature from a backwater world. A story? Tay finally repeated, his voice a low, dangerous hiss. The translator struggled with the tone, but the meaning was clear. He was furious. Jin's grin remained, but it was no longer just a smile. It had become a tool. It was a challenge. He kept his voice calm and conversational, as if they were discussing the weather. Yes, a story, Jin said. You see a punctured lung and you think, the human will drown. It will die, and you are right. Eventually it will die, but you did not ask. What will the human do in the 5 or 10 minutes before it dies? He leaned a little closer to the microphone. You taught Cadet Hana to strike the throat. A crushed larynx is a terrible injury. A human cannot speak. It can barely breathe. But you did not teach her what happens next. You did not teach her that for those last choking minutes that human is not a dying victim. It is a cornered animal. It has nothing left to lose. Its only goal is to take you with it. Jin's eyes scanned the rows of young cadets. He saw their confusion. They had been taught to win fights. They had not been taught about the psychology of a creature that knew it had already lost. A human with a crushed throat, Jin said, his words clear and sharp, still has two working hands. It can still grip a knife. It can still pull the trigger on a gun. It can still claw at your eyes. It can still use its body weight to tackle you and hold on while it bleeds out. You taught your students to create a weapon. A silent, pain-maddened creature with a very short timer until death. Is that a wise thing to create in the middle of a battle? A few of the cadets shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had never thought of it that way. To them, a neutralized target was a neutralized target. Instructor Tay's tail, which had been still, gave a single, sharp twitch. Theoretical nonsense, he rasped. A dying creature is no threat. We would simply move away. Move away? Jin's eyebrow went up. From a human who knows it is dying? A human can still run even while choking for a surprising distance. And what if you are in a closed space? A ship's corridor? A control room? That dying creature is now between you and the exit. Or between you and your objective. Your lesson created a problem, not a solution. Before Tay could respond, a young male cadet stood up from the middle of the crowd. It was Day. He was proud and his scales were still a brighter green, showing his youth. His pride could not take any more of this. You speak only words. Day's voice was loud, filled with anger and frustration. You talk of theories and stories. Our data is based on biology, on facts. Your species' weakness is a documented fact in the Galactic archives. You are slow. You are weak. You are trying to frighten us with scary tales because you have no physical strength. Jin's gaze moved from Tay to Day. His grin did not fade. If anything, it grew a little wider. He looked almost happy that someone had challenged him. Are they just stories, cadet? Jin asked, his voice still calm. Your instructor taught you how to break a human's knee. He is correct. It is not difficult to do, but what did he teach you happens after the knee is shattered? Day stood straighter, confident in his lesson. The human falls. It cannot stand. It is immobilized. It is no longer a threat. Is that what you believe? Jin asked softly. That a human on the ground is no longer a threat? Have you never heard of a thing called the ground fight? A human with a shattered knee can still sit up. It can still use its arms. It can fire a rifle from a seated or lying position, often with great accuracy. It can throw a grenade. It can set a bomb. It can use its own broken body as a trap, luring you in close so it can stab you with a hidden blade. It can even, if it is determined enough, use its arms to drag its broken body across the floor to get to you. To bite your ankle if that is all it can reach. The image was so vivid, so visceral, that a few of the cadets recoiled slightly. They imagined it. A broken, bleeding thing pulling itself relentlessly toward them, its eyes filled with nothing but hate. That is not how a warrior fights. Day spluttered, his translator fritzing with his emotion. No, Jin agreed. It is not how a warrior fights. It is how a survivor fights. And when you are trying to kill someone, you are not fighting a warrior who follows rules of honor. You are fighting a survivor who only wants you to die first. Jin looked back at Instructor Tay. You are teaching your students to win a duel. I am trying to explain that a human does not know they are in a duel. They are in a fight for their life. The rules are different. The amphitheater was filled with a tense silence. The Cathar belief system was built on honor, on skill, on facing an opponent directly. This human was describing a kind of brutal, ugly desperation that was alien to them. Instructor Tay finally broke the silence. He took a step forward, his claws flexing. You have criticized our lesson. You have called our knowledge flawed, but you have provided no proof. Only stories. He said the word like it was a dirty thing. Jin nodded, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. He glanced at Mira. She gave him another small, almost invisible nod. She was ready. Proof is a fair request, Jin said. Lectures are useful, but some lessons are best learned through experience. He stood up from his chair in the booth. My colleague and I would be happy to provide a practical supplement to your curriculum. A simple exercise. No live weapons. No intent to cause serious harm. Tay's eyes narrowed. What are you proposing? A demonstration, Jin said. A sparring match. Let your best cadets try to apply the lessons they learned today. Let them try to slay me. Let us see if their knowledge of human weakness is enough to win against a living, breathing example. A wave of disbelief went through the cadets. This soft human was challenging them directly? Day immediately took a step forward. I will do it. I will prove the strength of the Cathar. Instructor Tay looked from Day's furious face to Jin's calm, grinning one. He saw the absolute confidence in the human's eyes. It was not the arrogance of a braggart. It was the calm certainty of a master. Tay felt a cold trickle of doubt in his gut for the first time. But his pride and the pride of his entire species was on the line. He could not refuse. Very well, Tay said, his voice a gravelly rumble. We will adjourn to the primary training arena. Cadets Day and Hana, and you, Cadet Bin. He pointed to another strong-looking male. The three of you will face the human. Jin's grin was now the brightest thing in the room. Excellent, he said. I look forward to the lesson. As the cadets began to file out of the amphitheater, a buzz of excited chatter finally breaking the silence, Mira leaned over to Jin and spoke in a voice so low only he could hear. Try not to break any of them, she murmured. Diplomatic incident, remember? Jin just kept grinning. I'm not going to break their bodies, Mira, he said softly, his eyes watching the Cathar cadets stream out towards the arena. I'm going to break their textbook. The training arena was a large, circular room with soft, padded floors and walls. The air smelled clean and metallic. Bright lights shone down from the high ceiling. Around the edges of the room, the entire class of Cathar cadets stood in a silent, watching ring. Their scales seemed to absorb the light, making them look like a wall of dark, living stone. In the center of the arena, Jin stood alone. He had taken off his uniform jacket. He now wore only a simple dark shirt and pants. He looked small and soft compared to the Cathar. He stretched his arms slowly, rolling his shoulders. He did not look nervous. He looked like a man preparing for a light jog. On the other side of the arena, the three cadets stood together. Hana, the skilled and confident one, Day, the proud and angry one, and Bin, a strong and silent cadet who followed orders without question. They wore their training gear, which was light and flexible. Their claws were covered with soft caps to prevent serious cuts, but the impacts would still be painful. Instructor Tay stood near the edge, his arms crossed. His face was a mask of stern authority. The rules are simple, he announced, his voice echoing in the large space. This is a sparring match. The objective for the cadets is to subdue and immobilize the human Jin. They will use the techniques taught in today's lesson. No strikes to the eyes, no killing blows. The human may defend himself as he sees fit. The match will continue until one side can no longer fight or yields. Begin. There was no signal. The three Cathar cadets moved at once. They did not rush in blindly. They spread out, trying to surround Jin. They moved with that same fluid, predatory grace. Their steps were silent on the padded floor. Jin did not move to the center. He simply turned his body, keeping all three of them in his sight. His hands were open and relaxed at his sides. His feet were planted shoulder-width apart. He looked like he was waiting for a bus. Day was the first to attack. Remembering the lesson on the knee, he lunged forward, his leg snapping out in a powerful low kick aimed at the side of Jin's left knee. It was a perfect textbook strike. It was meant to break the joint and drop the human instantly. But Jin's knee was not there when the kick arrived. Instead of backing away, Jin did something the Cathar did not expect. He stepped forward. He moved inside the arc of the kick. His own leg brushed against Day's kicking leg, disrupting its force. At the same time, his left hand slapped down hard on Day's thigh, not to hurt it, but to push it down further. Day, unbalanced by the missed kick and the push, stumbled forward. Jin did not try to punch him. As Day stumbled past, Jin simply lifted his elbow and let Day's own momentum carry his head into it. There was a dull thud. It was not a hard hit, but it was perfectly placed on the side of Day's jaw. Day's head snapped to the side. He saw bright lights for a second and fell to one knee, disoriented and shocked. The whole thing took less than 2 seconds. Hana did not wait. She saw Day go down and she attacked from Jin's right side. Her strike was faster, smarter. She did not aim for a large joint. She went for the throat, just as she had practiced on the hologram. Her fingers, even with the soft caps, were like sharp little spears. Jin saw her coming from the corner of his eye. He didn't try to block her hand. He dropped his entire body weight. He fell straight down towards the floor. It was such a sudden, collapsing movement that Hana's perfect strike whistled through the empty air, where his neck had been just a moment before. Hana was overextended, her arm still out. Jin, now low to the ground, was beside her legs. He didn't try to stand up. He drove his shoulder into the back of her knee. It wasn't a powerful blow, but it was exactly the right place to hit. Hana's leg buckled instantly. She cried out in surprise and pain as she fell to the mat. Bin, the third cadet, saw his two partners on the ground in the first 5 seconds of the fight. He hesitated. This was not what was supposed to happen. The human was not fighting with strikes and kicks. He was moving like water, flowing around their attacks. Jin used that moment of hesitation. He was still on the ground near Hana. Instead of getting up, he rolled. He rolled towards Bin's feet. Bin, startled, took a step back and tried to kick at the rolling human. Jin caught the kicking foot. He didn't try to hold it. He just grabbed it and pulled while also pushing up with his body. It was a simple, ugly wrestling move. Bin, standing on one leg, had no balance. He crashed down onto the mat with a heavy thud. Now all 3 cadets were on the ground. Day was still shaking his head, his jaw aching. Hana was clutching her knee, her face a mask of pain and confusion. Bin was trying to scramble back to his feet. Jin was already up. He wasn't even breathing hard. He stood over them, his expression calm. He wasn't grinning anymore. The playful challenger was gone. In his place was a cold, focused professional. His eyes scanned the 3 Cathar, assessing, calculating. "Get up," he said, his voice flat. "The fight isn't over because you fell down." Anger and shame fueled them now. They got to their feet, more carefully this time. They circled him again, but their confidence was broken. They were no longer hunters. They were prey trying to look dangerous. Day charged again, this time with a wild swing of his clawed hand. Jin didn't move away. He moved forward into the swing. He caught Day's arm, twisted his own body, and used Day's charge to throw him over his hip. Day flew through the air and landed hard on his back, the air rushing out of his lungs with a loud gasp. Hana tried a different approach. She feinted high, then went low for another leg sweep. Jin simply lifted his foot and stomped down on her sweeping leg, pinning it to the floor for a split second. She yelled in pain. Before she could recover, his open palm smacked hard against the side of her head, right over her ear. It wasn't enough to knock her out, but her world became a dizzy mess of sound and confusion. She stumbled away, unable to stand straight. Bin saw his chance. He came at Jin from behind while Jin was dealing with Hana. He wrapped his arms around Jin in a powerful bear hug, lifting him off the ground. He squeezed, trying to crush the human's ribs. "I have him," Bin shouted. For a moment it looked like the Cathar had won. The human was trapped. Jin did not panic. He let his body go limp for a second, making himself heavier. Then he threw his head back. The back of his skull connected with Bin's face with a sickening crack. It was not the hard part of his skull, but the softer base. It was a dirty, brutal move. Bin grunted in pain and surprise, his grip loosening just a little. It was all the space Jin needed. He drove his elbow backwards once, twice into Bin's side, right where the ribs were. Bin gasped and his arms fell away. Jin dropped to the floor, spun around, and swept Bin's legs out from under him. Bin fell heavily. Before he could move, Jin was on him. He didn't punch or kick. He put his knee on Bin's chest, not too hard, but enough to hold him down. One of his hands gripped Bin's throat, not squeezing, just resting there. A clear message: I could crush your windpipe right now. The fight was over. It had lasted 11 seconds. The arena was completely silent. The watching cadets were frozen. They had just watched their 3 best peers be dismantled by a creature they had been told was weak and slow. He had not thrown a single punch. He had used their own speed and strength against them. He had used the ground, his elbows, his head, his weight. He had fought in a way that was ugly, efficient, and terrifying. Jin stood up. He offered a hand to Bin, who was still on the ground, wheezing. Bin just stared at the hand, unable to comprehend the gesture. Jin shrugged and turned away. He looked at Day and Hana, who were still on the mat, bruised and defeated. Then he looked at Instructor Tay, who was standing as still as a statue, his face unreadable. The grin returned to Jin's face, but it was different now. It was not the grin of a friendly guest. It was the cold, sharp grin of a predator who had just proven he was at the top of the food chain. "You taught them how to slay a human body," Jin said, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. but you never taught them how to survive one. The silence in the training arena was thick and heavy. It was a living thing, pressing down on everyone. The only sounds were the ragged breaths of the 3 defeated cadets and the soft hum of the lights above. The Cathar cadets standing around the edges of the room did not move. They did not speak. They could only stare at the human who had just rewritten their understanding of the universe. Jin stood in the center of the mat. He was not even breathing heavily. He looked at the 3 young Cathar on the ground. Day was holding his jaw, his pride shattered. Hana was clutching her knee, her confidence broken. Bin was still on his back, staring at the ceiling as if he had forgotten how to stand. They were not badly hurt, but they were utterly defeated. Their spirits were bruised far more than their bodies. Instructor Tay finally moved. He walked slowly onto the mat. His steps were heavy. He looked at his best students, scattered on the floor like broken toys. He looked at the human who had done this with such casual ease. The scars on his face seemed deeper in the bright light. His yellow eyes were wide, not with anger, but with a dawning, horrifying understanding. Jin turned his head and met Tay's gaze. The cold focus was gone from his eyes. The predatory sharpness had faded, but the easy grin from the lecture hall had not returned. What was left was a calm, serious expression, the expression of a teacher who had just given a very important lesson. You taught them how to slay a human body. Jin said again, his voice quiet but clear in the silent room. You focused on the hardware, the machine. You showed them where to cut the wires and break the pipes. He took a slow step, his eyes sweeping over the watching cadets. He saw their fear. He saw their confusion. He needed them to understand. But you never asked about the software, he continued. The operating system. The human spirit. The will to live. You taught them to target the heart. But you never learned that a human can run on pure hatred for a full minute after the heart has stopped beating. You think a punctured lung means we give up? It doesn't. It means we have 5 minutes left and we decide to spend all 5 of them on you. He pointed to Day. He attacked my knee. A good plan. But he expected me to try to protect my knee. He did not expect me to break his jaw with his own speed. He did not expect me to sacrifice my balance to take his. He looked at Hana. She went for the throat. A perfect strike. But she expected me to block her hand. She did not expect me to drop my whole body to the ground and attack her legs. She did not expect the fight to go down there. Jin finally stopped in front of Instructor Tay. The older Cathar looked down at the human, but for the first time, he did not feel taller. You taught them to fight a duel, Jin said. With rules. With honor. With predictable moves. You taught them to break the parts of the machine. But a human in a fight for their life is not a duelist. They are a force of nature. They are chaos. They do not care about rules. They only care about one thing, making the other person stop. He let the word stop hang in the air. It was a much more final word than yield. You want to learn the real way to slay a human? Jin asked, his voice dropping almost to a whisper. But every cadet heard it. It is not a lesson in anatomy. It is a lesson in psychology. He held up one finger. First, you do not aim for the lung. You aim for the hope. You must make the human believe there is no way out. That rescue is not coming. That survival is impossible. He held up a second finger. Second, you do not shatter the knee. You shatter the will to stand back up. You must break their reason to fight. Their friends are dead. Their home is gone. Their cause is lost. He held up a third finger. And third, and most important, you must do it from very, very far away. Because if you get close, if you let a human see your face, if they know that you are the one who took their hope, then you have made it personal. And a human with a personal reason to hate you will cross oceans of stars and walk through fields of fire just to have the chance to make you stop. He lowered his hand. The real way to slay a human is to make them believe they are already dead. You have to kill their spirit before you can stop their heart. He looked around the room, making eye contact with as many young cadets as he could. And I can assure you, Jin said, his voice firm and certain, that is a far more difficult task than breaking a knee or crushing a throat. We have spent 10,000 years of our history trying to break each other's spirits. We have become very, very hard to break. The truth of his words settled over the room. The Cathar had seen themselves as superior warriors. But this human was talking about a different kind of war. A total war. A war that was not fought just with weapons but with the mind. A war that did not end when the body fell. Instructor Tay was still for a long time. He looked at the defeat in his students' eyes. He remembered the humans' effortless, brutal moves in the fight. He thought about the stories of human history he had skimmed in the archives. Stories of wars that lasted for generations, of soldiers fighting in trenches filled with mud and disease, of pilots flying burning planes into enemy ships. He had thought they were tales of desperation. Now he understood they were tales of a terrifying, relentless will. He had been teaching his students how to win a battle. The human was explaining how to survive a war against an enemy that did not know how to surrender. Tay slowly bent his head. It was a small gesture, but for a Cathar of his status, it was like kneeling. He was acknowledging a superior, not in strength or speed, but in understanding. The lesson, Tay said, his voice old and tired, is learned. Jin gave a single, slow nod. The seriousness left his face, replaced by a look of simple exhaustion. The performance was over. The point was made. He walked over to Day and offered his hand again. This time, after a moment's hesitation, Day took it. Jin pulled the young cadet to his feet. He did the same for Hana and Bin. He didn't say anything to them. There were no words that could fix their shattered pride in that moment. The act of helping them up was its own message. Mira, who had been watching silently from the doorway, finally walked onto the mat. She handed Jin a small bottle of water. He took it and drank deeply. The cadets began to murmur among themselves. The spell was broken. The fear was still there, but it was now mixed with a burning curiosity. They looked at the human not as a weak animal, but as a deep, dark ocean. They had only seen the surface. They knew now that terrible things lived in the depths. Instructor Tay looked at Jin, his expression unreadable. "You fight. Without honor," he said. It was not an accusation anymore. It was an observation. Jin finished his water and looked back at Tay. "You are right," he agreed. "We do. Honor is a luxury for the winning side. Survival is a dirty, ugly business, and my people are very, very good at survival." He turned and began to walk with Mira towards the exit. The wall of Cathar cadets parted for them without a sound, creating a path. They did not look at the humans with contempt anymore. They looked at them with a new, deep, and respectful fear. The lesson on how to slay a human was over. A new, much more frightening lesson had just begun. The day after the sparring match, the Cathar Military Academy was a different place. The air did not feel the same. Before there had been a constant hum of confidence, of pride. Now a quiet tension had taken its place. The cadets moved through the gray hallways with less noise. They spoke in lower voices. Their eyes, when they met, held a shared confusion. The three cadets who had fought Jin, Day, Hana, and Bin were the center of this quiet storm. They did not speak about what happened. They went to their classes and did their drills, but the easy grace was gone from their movements. They were thinking now. Every move they practiced, they saw the human's calm face. They felt the shock of his elbow, the surprise of his falls. They had been taught a dance, and he had shown them a street fight. Instructor Tay did not call for a general assembly. He did not make a speech. He spent the morning alone in his office watching the recording of the fight. He watched it again and again. He saw the same thing every time. It was not a fluke. It was not a trick. It was a complete and total dismantling of his teachings. The human had not been stronger or faster. He had been smarter. He had been more adaptable. He had understood the reality of violence in a way the Cathar had forgotten. In the afternoon, Tai sent a private message. He requested a meeting with the human liaison, Jin. The meeting was to be in Tai's office with no one else present. Jin arrived at the appointed time. He wore his simple uniform again. He looked calm and rested. He nodded politely to Tay as he entered the room. The office was sparse, with a large desk and a few chairs. On the wall was a display of traditional Cathar weapons. Tay did not sit behind his desk. That would have been a power move, and he no longer felt he had any power over this human. Instead, he stood by the window looking out at the training fields. "Thank you for coming," Tay said. His voice was rough, but the anger was gone. "Of course," Jin said. He stood quietly, waiting. Tay turned from the window. He looked tired. The scars on his face seemed more pronounced. "I have watched the recording many times," he said. "What you did, it was not what I taught." "No," Jin agreed. "It was not. For my entire life," Tay continued, "I have believed that combat was about skill. about precision, about striking the correct point with the correct force. We have studied the bodies of every species in the Galactic Compact. We know where their hearts are. We know how thick their skulls are. We have charts and graphs. We believe that knowledge was power. Jin nodded slowly. Knowledge is power. But you were using the wrong knowledge. You were reading the specs on the car's engine, but you never learned how the driver thinks. The driver, Tay repeated. He looked down at his own hands, at the claws that could shred flesh. You said we were fighting the machine, but we should have been fighting the spirit inside. Yes, Jin said. You can know everything about a human body and still lose a fight to a human being. Because the body is just the tool. The will is the hand that holds the tool. Tay was silent for a long moment. He was struggling with a deep, uncomfortable idea. This way of fighting. This survival. You said it is without honor. Jin walked over to the display of Cathar weapons. He looked at the sharp, elegant blades. Instructor Tay, he said, what is the purpose of a military? To defend our people, Tay answered immediately. To project strength, to win wars. To ensure survival, Jin said, turning to face him. When your people's survival is on the line, does honor feed your children? Does honor stop a bomb? My people have a saying, all's fair in love and war. It means that when something is truly important, the normal rules do not apply. The only rule that matters is to win, to survive. He took a step closer. You called it without honor. We call it pragmatism. We call it doing what is necessary. If biting an enemy's ankle is what it takes to save my friend's life, I will bite until I taste bone, and I will not feel shame. I will feel glad that my friend is alive. Tay felt a cold shiver go down his spine. The human's words were so simple, so direct. They held a terrifying truth. He thought of his own family, his own children. What would he do to protect them? Would he worry about honor, or would he do what was necessary? The answer was suddenly, shamefully clear. The curriculum is wrong, Tay said finally, his voice a soft rasp. It is dangerously wrong. I have been sending warriors out into the galaxy with a map that leads to a cliff. Jin did not smile. He simply nodded. A new map is needed. Tay looked at Jin, his yellow eyes filled with a new, grim respect. I must ask you, as one soldier to another, this real way to slay a human, to break their spirit. Is it even possible? Jin met his gaze. His own eyes were dark and serious. It is possible, he said, but it requires a level of cruelty that most civilized species find unthinkable. You must be willing to burn their worlds, to erase their history, to kill their young. You must be prepared to become a monster so complete that you leave them with nothing left to love and nothing left to fight for. You must be ready to sacrifice your own soul to break theirs. He let the awful words hang in the air. And even then, Jin added, his voice almost a whisper, there is no guarantee, because sometimes from the ashes a new hate grows, stronger and harder than before. We are very good at holding grudges, Tai understood. He finally fully understood. The Cathar had been playing a game of chess, thinking they could win by taking the king. The humans were playing a different game entirely. They would burn the board, break the pieces and salt the earth so nothing could ever grow again, just to make sure you could never play against them. A new curriculum is required, Tay said, his mind made up, not how to slay a human. He looked at Jin, a soldier acknowledging a greater strategist. But how to understand a human, and perhaps why one should endeavor to avoid the necessity of the former. For the first time since he entered the room, a genuine warm smile spread across Jin's face. It was not the predator's grin or the cold teacher's smile. It was a smile of real satisfaction. Now that, Jin said, is a lesson worth teaching. That is the first step toward peace. Later that day, Instructor Tay stood before his cadets again. They were in a smaller classroom, their faces nervous and expectant. Day, Hana, and Bin sat in the front row. Tay did not have a hologram of a human body. He had no lists of weaknesses. Cadets, he began, his voice different. It was less certain but more thoughtful. We begin a new study today. We will put away our charts of lungs and bones. We will now study human history. We will study their stories. We will learn why they fight the way they do. We will learn about the things they love and the things they are willing to die for. Because to understand how to fight a human, you must first understand what a human is. And after today, I am not sure any of us truly do. He looked at the 3 cadets in the front row. The lesson is no longer about slaying. The lesson is now about survival. And the first rule of survival is to know your enemy. And the second rule, if you are very smart, is to never let them become your enemy in the first place. In their quarters, Jin and Mira packed their bags. Their work here was done. That was a risk, Mira said, folding a shirt, showing them all that. It could have gone very badly. It was a necessary risk, Jin replied. It is better to be respected and feared than to be underestimated. Underestimation gets people killed. Fear? Fear makes people think. And right now the Cathar are thinking very, very hard. He zipped his bag and looked out the window at the alien stars. We just gave them the first and most important lesson about humanity. We are not the weakest species in the galaxy. We are the most dangerous. And the only thing more dangerous than a human is a human who has made a friend think twice about becoming an enemy. The galaxy was a big place. But news, especially frightening news, had a way of traveling fast. The story of the human who waited, grinned, and asked if they wanted to learn the real way would spread. It would change things. And for the first time in a long time, Jin felt a small flicker of hope. The lesson was over. The learning had just begun.